Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Thought it's time. Let's do a midweek trade deadline video where I'm going to go over every team across the MLB, kind of what I expect to see them over the next week do for the trade deadline. Some are buyers, some are sellers, some are somewhat in the middle. We're going to go over all of that. Before I do, I just want to thank everyone. My last Power Rankings video off the charts. We continue to do those every Sunday. We're on a giveaway for subscribers. Once we get to 750, I'll be giving away a hat. Today I'm wearing Kansas City because honestly, I don't have much reason to talk about them all season. And today we know where they're going to be on this board, so why not wear their hat? So if you're new to this channel, and I know a lot of you are, just smash the like button. Join the community. It's a great community. We have a Discord, all that stuff in the comments. Other than that, we're just going to jump into it alphabetically, starting from the top. We have the Arizona Diamondbacks. I have them as a buyer, but kind of near the bottom of the buyer category. They're a team that I expect to do maybe a little bit of buying. They're probably going to buy whoever is kind of left at the trade deadline. Their obvious needs, depth in their rotation, a little bit of rotation, maybe add a bat in there somewhere. But the Diamondbacks are known for kind of being a budget team. So far, they haven't spent a lot this year. They haven't spent a lot in their history leading up until now, the past couple of years. But of course, they have a lot of these young guys who are going to be locked in for long term at somewhat of a better salary. So they're not going to want to give their long term window up by selling too much or buying too much, giving up too much at this trade deadline. They're in a tough spot. They're just going to be happy to make the playoffs, I think. Next up, we have the Atlanta Braves. Really, Atlanta is also kind of in that buying category again. I think they're near the bottom. They're one of the better teams across the MLB. There isn't any huge obvious holes in this team that they really need to address, like we're going to see with a lot of the other teams we're going to talk about. But, of course, like most teams that are playoff contenders, bullpen is going to be something that they're going to look to add to. Don't really expect too much big names to be moving in that direction. Next up, we have the Baltimore Orioles, and they're clearly in the buy situation, probably right there near the top. A lot of rumors going around, Ohtani possibly, but we'll get to that in a minute. But they have the room to spend. They're a team that hasn't spent too much on their budget overall, and they're in kind of win-now mode. At the start of this season, we didn't really expect them to be top of the American League, top of the American League East, but now here we are. They're in a position, and their team has been performing. Of course, there's some issues. We want to see them probably address a starting pitcher, add some depth to that bullpen, bring in some guys because there has been issues here and there from there. So far, we saw them do a little bit of that, but the pitching is something we're going to want to see Baltimore attack, and I expect them to do that because they have the room in there really to get in the mix. Next up, Boston Red Sox. Boston, in my opinion, clearly in the buy category. They're a team that is right there on the cusp for the playoffs. They don't want to miss the playoffs again. They finished last place in the American League East last year. That is the last thing they want to do right now. There is an opportunity here. They do have a lot of the rotation possibly coming back soon. However, I wouldn't wait for that. I do expect them to probably be in the mix for a starting pitcher as well. Again, any team going into the playoffs is probably going to make some adjustments at bullpen as well. But overall, their offense has been strong. We saw them add a little bit of depth too already with Kike Hernandez. Boston is clearly in the playoff mix, and they're not going to want to miss the playoffs 2 years in a row. That's just not something Boston does. So expect them to buy. Next up, Chicago Cubs. Selling. They at one point they've probably been the highest rumor of team that's selling out of most teams. With Stroman, he's been being talked about for weeks. We've got Bellinger, he's been being talked about for weeks. Now there's starting to be rumors of Hendricks possibly moving, a lifelong Cub guy, and a solid pitcher that with the market that it's going to be for starting pitchers, I think the Cubs are going to be selling all that stuff. They're in a position where they faded pretty quickly over the past month or so. Every so often we think they're going to have a spot. I clearly put them in the wrong spot. So if you skipped ahead, you got screwed. Clearly selling. But like I was saying, they're selling. Next up, Chicago White Sox, a team that is also going to be selling at the trade deadline, and there's no question about it. If it wasn't for them being fourth and quite a bit behind, I would maybe think that they might be in the market to have a shot at this division. We talk about it all the time. Division's weak. But I think it's pretty clear that the rebuild is here for the White Sox. Talked about it in the last power rankings. They just need to start the rebuild. And they have a lot of the assets that people are going to be looking for. Starting pitching. They got Giolito, probably going to be the hottest guy on the market for starting pitching. A lot of people are going to be looking for that, and they probably can get quite a haul for that. Lance Lynn possibly. And I've even heard rumors about Dylan Cease. However, he still has 2 more years on his contract. So if they're willing to do that, and we've seen teams in the Central do that with like Minnesota, with Berrios, they could get quite a haul if they're willing to move Cease, and that could be a completely new team next year if they do pull the trigger on their rotation. They got 3 big names up for grabs. Next up, we have the Cincinnati Reds. They're clearly going to be buying. They're right there in the thick of things with Milwaukee Brewers for leading that division, but they got to address the starting pitching. Of course, with Green, he's been out for a little bit. He will likely be coming back, making a difference there. They still have the depth that they want to affect, but that doesn't seem to be the problem with the Brewers because the Brewers keep shutting them out. So I don't know really what bats they can bring in. Rotate their lineup seems pretty set in stone. So they might be a little bit, might just be a case of teams too young, but I do expect them to buy. Again, looking for bullpen as well. Next up, we got the Cleveland Guardians, and believe it or not, they're going to be buying. No question about it to me. They're in one of those situations where they can address offense because they have had one of the worst offenses probably in the buy category, and that seems to be what's been holding them back. Pitching has not been too bad of a deal. Their bullpen has been pretty effective. But they're going to want someone that has some pop, some can do some damage in the middle of their lineup because that's really what they're lacking, someone to help protect Ramirez in the middle of the lineup. So I expect the Guardians to go out there and get a bat. We're going to get to Colorado in a minute. Actually right now, there's some possible bats that maybe could be a fit there. For Colorado, you got Grichuk, Profar, CJ Cron, and there's even some relievers that I expect to move from Colorado. It's really hard to figure out what Colorado's all about. They've been pretty whack all season. I keep doing this just because I'm so used to power rankings and putting them lineup after lineup. But they're clearly a seller, the Rockies. They got I already just want to wear them 6 guys. Hard to figure out what they're doing, but they're clearly last place in this division. So holding on to those guys, just not going to have any benefit for them. Next up, this one's a little tough. Detroit Tigers, I'm going to put them honestly right here in the slightly buy category. Maybe think about selling right there on the line. I'm going to move them over there because they're clearly sellers. But Detroit, they're in that division where they're just one hot streak away from being right there in it. They have a week. They win 6 games in a row or something like that. They're right there in the thick of things, and I probably wouldn't see them selling because honestly, they're good enough to win that division if they get close enough. However, if they kind of stumble, they do have some pieces in their starting rotation that could drive some interest, with Eduardo Rodriguez being the highlight of that. So I would expect him to move if Detroit sells. But right now, they're kind of in that middle ground. It's going to be interesting to see how this week plays out and what they choose to do. Next up, Houston Astros. They're clearly in that buying category. The team that is looking to repeat as world champions would be the first team since, I think, 2001, New York Yankees. They want to get back in the dance. They want a chance to win it, repeat, and they're going to need to buy in order to do that. They have to address the starting pitching. The injuries have really held them back this season. It's a wonder they're still in the mix, and I would expect them that to be their biggest thing. That's really what they badly need. Next up, big sellers, Kansas City. It's not a whole lot, though, what they're going to sell. I'm trying to highlight them, but really they don't have a whole lot of assets willing to sell that they haven't already sold. They sold Chapman already off to Texas. They potentially could have someone like Greinke be moved. I think he has a no-trade clause. He would have to waive it. I could maybe see him doing that to go back to Arizona. A team that I talked about was maybe going to be getting the scraps off the scrap heap at the end. He could be a bottom of the rotation guy. Kind of fits to Arizona. He used to play there. I don't know what that relationship's like. So that's like the only thing I can maybe see him going. Barlow, relief guy. He's definitely going to be moved. Kansas City is just going to be where. Next up, we have the LA Angels. The rumor has it Ohtani, always on the talk, going somewhere. We see the articles. Honestly, I think it's just completely clickbait. There's no question about it to me that they're going to be buying. They haven't made the playoffs since, 2004? So we're going on almost 20 years since they made the playoffs. This could potentially be the last time they have Ohtani on a hunt for 60 home runs. And think of the ticket sales that could drive just for them on this year. And the signal it sends to their fans if they trade this guy in a playoff race. They're one game out, maybe. In my opinion, they're buying. They're going to be looking for relief pitchers. Of course, all the teams are. But they're also going to be looking for some depth on the starting pitcher. They need to bring in some people to help Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani make the playoffs. And this is probably going to be their best chance in a while to be able to do it. So I do not expect them to sell whatsoever. Next up, Dodgers. Rotation. It's been a big question mark for the Dodgers all season long, but now they have a chance to address it, and I've said they're going to address it for the number of weeks now in the power rankings. I keep expecting them to, and they will. The other thing that they could really bring in is an extra bat in that lineup. It's just some parts of the season they're kind of, in my opinion, missing Justin Turner a lot, just the extra pop somewhere in that lineup. I do expect them to bring in a bat as well. Next up, the Miami Marlins. Early in the season, I was all out on them, but now I do expect them to be a buyer at the deadline here. They're in a unique position where most teams aren't looking for help in pitching. Miami has probably the deepest pitching in all of the buying category, but what they are lacking, and we know it, is offense, specifically on those corners. Third base and first base, they got Cooper at first base, just not performing, not the kind of guy you want on your first base slot. Bringing a big bat there would be huge. And Wendell over on the third. He's just a utility guy, right? He's normally a guy you would be happy on your bench, but as a starter third baseman, they can do better, and I expect them to make some moves to improve that lineup. Next up, we got the Milwaukee Brewers. They're very similar to the Miami Marlins. They need to address their offense, one of the worst offenses in the league. First base, Rowdy Tellez just not getting it done. I know he's on the IL now, which makes it even worse that they're on to their second option. And the outfield, they're just not getting the production you need from a playoff World Series contending outfield. Their pitching, not really a problem. I don't expect that to be their target at the trade deadline. It's going to be those things on the offense. Next up, we've got the Minnesota Twins. They're going to be buyers. They're going to be looking for bullpen depth and maybe a potential bat in the offense, add a little bit of depth in the bat. I've heard links between O'Neill and the Cardinals going there. We'll touch on that in a little bit with the Cardinals. But, yeah, it's their time to shine. Twins are on top. They're expected to maybe win this division. They've been spending the money. They're trying to go get after it. Expect them to buy. Like, why would they change the narrative? They're not in a position to really do that. Next up, we got the New York Mets. And what an awful situation. They're probably in one of the worst situations of everyone on this whole board. I expect them to be selling. Not a whole lot that they can really sell. A lot of the guys have monster contracts, and if they're going to have any shot at moving them, they're really going to have to retain some of that. Otherwise, they got Verlander, they got Scherzer, two guys with no trade clauses, and they have to get them to agree to want to go to a contender. If they can do that, there is a market for them, and they'll probably get a return. But this team's in a world of hurt, in my opinion. I'm not sure how they're going to navigate their way out of it. Next up, New York Yankees. So without a doubt, it's trade deadline. What else are the Yankees going to do other than buy, right? The Yankees are going to be buyers. They have a lot of help. They need a lot of help. Judge needs help. Without him in the lineup, the team has not been able to perform at all. Bring in some bullpen, maybe add a little bit of depth in the rotation, but expect the Yankees to make a big splash here. In my opinion, if any team has a big shot at the Yankees, they're at Ohtani, it's the Yankees. It would involve him signing as well, I think. That's the only way I really see them moving Ohtani, because he would make it clear that he's not going to come back. The Yankees would just overpay through the nose somehow, and that's how I see it happening. Otherwise, I do kind of expect Ohtani to be there at season end. Next up, Oakland A's. Don't really need to say much about them. They've been selling for a long time already. I guess if you had to sell someone, you'd want to sell their owner, Jeff Fisher, right? Is that what? I think that's his name. But yeah, you'd want to sell the owner. This guy has just led this team into disarray. they're selling. It's like a clearance sale, I guess, but it's already happened. So you're getting the scraps off the scrap heap. You might see relief pitcher Blackburn get moved. Maybe a couple other relief pitchers that I wouldn't be able to name right now. So that's kind of what you would expect. Next up, Philadelphia Phillies. They need, I think, a bat in there, right? They're buying. They want to repeat. They want to go back to the World Series, take it this time, but they need some offensive help. Kyle Schwarber, top of that lineup, just not getting it done. Maybe some other substitute for him coming from the right hand side of the plate. That's what I could see Phillies doing. But other than that, maybe more pitching depth. They all need it. Next up, Pittsburgh. Talking at the end of April, you would never have expected it to fall apart as bad as it did, but the Pittsburgh Pirates are clearly sellers right now. But they don't have a whole lot. Maybe that could go for sale. We might see Rich Hill fetch something again in one of those situations where one of the teams looking for depth, late fifth in the rotation pitching, like Arizona, maybe like a guy that can eat up innings in the postseason and a blowout kind of thing. Might see him get traded. The one thing that I've seen is Bednar, their relief pitcher for the Pirates, who has been lights out. He's still under contract, of course, but he's probably one guy that would fetch a pretty penny and might be worth looking at if you're the Pittsburgh Pirates. Next up, we got the Padres. Running out of room on this side, but I'm just going to put them over here in the bye. They're fourth in the division, but I don't think that matters. They've already spent the money. What else do they really have to lose at this point? And they're a team that's very capable of going on a run. I get accused of being too much on the Padres bandwagon still, but I see it there. It's still there. They're very clearly in the playoff race, and they're hovering around 500, and I don't think it's going to take too much to get that last wild card spot. So they're very much in it, and they don't have... What else are they going to... I don't see them selling. They're definitely going to be buying, and that's the same with their division rival, the San Francisco Giants. Giants are in a kind of a unique situation as well. They're coming into the season, kind of look to me at least that they threw a lineup together and it works out. But what do we expect? Anything else from the Giants? No. So they're in a position. They've been struggling over the last week or so. So I don't know if they're going to go out and make a big splash, but I do think they can make an addition in areas that other teams aren't really looking at. Infield is one of those. Adding to the bats, being a little stronger. The competition doesn't seem to be as big in that area, some depth there. Maybe we could see them adding a little bit more depth to the starting pitching. Next up, Seattle. Seattle has been good enough now that we're going to be talking about them being a buyer, right? They're buying. And what else are they going to do? They didn't buy in the offseason. Everyone probably expected them to address their offense a little bit in the offseason. They didn't do that. Brought in Hernandez, but whoop-de-doo. The outfield and everywhere pretty much on offense, just not producing, and it might be time that we see some of these guys that have been there for a little bit be shipped out in return for a new start for them, as well as some offensive return for Seattle. See how that works. I don't think there's going to be a lot of competition for those big right fields. You might see someone like Grichuk going to Seattle. Again, an ex-Blue Jay, same kind of situation. Who knows how that will work out, but there's some offense. Bellinger's on there. Those kind of guys, I think that's what Seattle's going to be hunting for. Rotation, they're one of the lucky teams. Their rotation's solid enough that I think they can just go with that. Of course, bullpen depth, continuously the topic. Next up, St. Louis. We've got Montgomery, we got Flaherty, we got O'Neill, and we got, who's the other guy here? Hicks, like Aaron Hicks. So they got a couple of bats up for sale. They got a couple of rotation up for sale. I think it's going to be a big selling frenzy over in St. Louis. Anyone that thinks that they might sell Goldschmidt or Arenado is out of their mind. It's not going to happen. They're going to use those guys to rebuild this team, build around those guys. But St. Louis, they have too much at stake here, and they're just not going to get back into it. So this is a chance for them to take those four guys that I think would fetch a pretty good price for them, and they're going to be walking at the end of the season, chance to get some sort of return for them. Otherwise, if they just played it out, those guys don't make the playoffs, those guys all walk, they're going to have nothing, whereas I think they can get quite a good return otherwise. Next up, got Tampa Bay Rays. Wow, I did not expect the buy side to be as super populated. I didn't really plan this out, but they're buying as much as any of these other teams. They need rotation. They need bullpen. That's been their downfall over the past couple months. It's not their fault. They've been dealing with injuries, but they need to bring something in if they're going to keep this up. Otherwise, we could see the Tampa Bay Rays out of the playoffs if they don't turn this ship around, because the rest of these teams, they're all fighting for those extra players. They're all fighting for those extra wins that they're going to pick up down the stretch here. And Tampa Bay has to compete just as much. Next up, the Texas Rangers. Looking for them to add more bullpen, even more. They're going in this buy category. I'm just going to put them up over here. They're buying as much as everyone. They've already bought a reliever, but they're going to keep buying. The offense is the one thing they've been leaning on immensely, but having watched them play Houston, the guys they're going to be matching up, battling the rest of the season with, they've been giving up a lot of runs, and they just can't keep that up, especially if they're going to want to win this division. So they got to address that, and I expect them to. It's win now mode for them for sure. Toronto. If you ask me, I would have kind of thought that they were going to be buying, but maybe I shouldn't put them in the middle. I'm going to move them kind of like over to the side here. I think they might stand pat. It wouldn't surprise me if the Blue Jays stand pat. They're in one of those unique positions where if you really look at it, they're fairly steady in all areas. They are getting Ryu back. Who knows what he's going to like. He probably won't be that great or make that big of an impact, but he is adding more depth. He's possibly covering the Manoah issue in the long term. Who knows how that's going to work out too, but the rotation's pretty solid. They have 5 solid pitchers. The bullpen realistically just doesn't seem to work out most nights, but realistically it's a pretty solid bullpen. Maybe they'll add one guy. I don't know. But and the bats, I don't think there's anything really to do there. The team is there. So I kind of expect them, with the prices being so insane as they are going to be, to stand pat at this trade deadline. Last seller, last team, last everything. We have the Washington Nationals. Sure, they don't have a whole lot to sell. They got someone like Lane Thomas, maybe as a bat, potentially going somewhere. Patrick Corbin, he could go somewhere. Trevor Williams. Those are pretty much the 3 names you might see coming out of Washington, maybe in a couple minor league guys. But yeah, there you have it, guys. Buyers seems to be a lot more. Maybe in the past when the playoffs were not as crazy as they are, they wouldn't be as much. But so this has been one of the most exciting seasons of baseball. The playoff race is going to be super tight. It's going to be awesome. After the trade deadline, I will continue to do the power rankings every Sunday. It comes out around 6 p.m. Pacific time. We'll be doing playoff prediction videos. We'll be doing Cy Young prediction videos, all that fun stuff. So if you enjoyed this video, you enjoy other content like this, subscribe to the channel below. 750 subs by the end of August. I expect it to happen probably within 2 weeks at this rate. We'll be giving away a hat, so make sure you don't miss out on that. Keep watching the videos. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you for that next one.